let's start building this header. So we'll of course get rid of this. Let's put a comment in. Excuse me. So for the header there, just for us to refer to. And of course, we're going to start with a header tag. Something else from Emmet I just want to show as well. So we put header dot. Let's just say BG dash. I think it's dark green A. We create that sort of header with the background sorted there. I'm going to put a div in there. That's going to be used for like stylistic reasons in case we want to shrink the contents. You know, nowadays we see a lot of websites where the screen is very central, especially on the large screens, without much going towards the outside to keep our focus to the center of the screen. So this div is more stylistic. Obviously, a header is basically a div, but just semantically called a header. So yeah, let's have a look at what's happening now. Don't have anything because, of course, there's nothing for the header to expand to. So let's add some things in there. So it's the main part of our header. It is exactly what the site is. So let's just give it a h1, and we're going to call it, of course, a dot appall. Now hopefully there we go. The green background comes up, and if we think mobile first, what we're going to have on the mobile. So actually on the mobile, we're just going to have h1 dot appall, and then we're going to have a sort of icon that is going to be a sort of burger menu. We're just going to leave that with an X for now. And we can see that, of course, on top of each other. Now we can start implementing Flexbox. So we're going to go here, we're going to go class, we're going to choose flex, which is going to create this as a sort of flex display, this div here. So we're going to put flex row, which is then going to put them into a row. And then we're going to put justify green. And there's no points going for what this is going to do, so we're going to save that twice. I can see here the adaptable on the left and the X on the right. And right now, you can't really see the adaptable. Let's change the color of the text. So let's go text dash white, and we can see the change of color. The text here is actually quite small as well, so let's change the size. So we go text. Let's see what 3XL looks like. That's not too bad. And now we can add some padding. So let's do padding X, padding Y separate. So PX on the whole thing. Not 0, of course. Let's move put 4. See what happens. So you see how that's done a little indent there. And PY, let's call it 8. Although actually we are doing mobile first, so we should looking at this on a mobile screen. It's going to look very small though, so sorry for that. We can see we've got our, Dr. Paul, the X on the right. So we can go to iPhone SE. I think 5 is one of the smallest ones, so let's work with that. And maybe we'll change that to 6. Yeah, that's looking pretty decent in my opinion for a start. So let's start adding the more complex things in as well. So we're going to have one a nav, of course, and that nav is going to have a UL in, and that UL is going to have 4 list items. So these list items are going to be called adopt, advice, got news, and organizations. We're going to add that in. And before we can go to a bigger screen now to avoid the sort of slowness of things when we're in the sort of inspect. And straight away we can see we've got a problem. So of course when we go bigger, we don't want to have this X. So with this X, what we can do, so let's call the class and let's just say flex. And then when we get to, right now we're going to say medium-sized screens, we want it actually to be hidden. we do that straight away, it's gone. And if we look responsive wise, so we also need to do the exact opposite for here. So let's actually do that first. Let's do this nav. So it's going to be hidden until we get to a medium-sized screen, and then at that point it's going to be flexed. So let's see how this affects our page. So here we have our sort of breakpoint, and we switch to the drop down has now gone into just a typical navbar menu. Let's make this small again, as we are doing mobile first. We do want to consider that first, and now we're going bigger. I want to start considering how that looks. So straight away, as you'd expect, we want this UL to have a flex row, so we can have that class. So we need this to be flex, and because of course this is inside the nav parent, the ULs are inside the nav parent, you don't need to worry about any of the sort of hiding the class or anything here, because if the nav's hidden, then this whole thing is hidden. So flex, we want flex row, and we probably don't want any, anything justified on this. This whole thing as well, we could put to align center, which is actually items in this case. Item center, save that. So yeah, we've just implemented that sort of flex row. We've made sure that these are both centrally aligned across the flex axis. Now we want a bit more padding on these. They're not looking very good being central, so we can sort of go through and we can alt all these. And we do it at the same time. So the class, let's just do P2. Now that is looking much better than it was before. I think we'll keep it like that for now, in case, unless we see anything crazy. As well, I've realised that we're actually going to have something else over on the end, which will be a span of just account. And now we can see we're getting really quite, everything's getting quite cramped here. And actually, instead of the medium sort of screen we were looking at before, maybe we're actually going to have to start looking at large. So once we realise that, it's just a simple change like that. No going through and changing, you know, all the media queries and all that sort of stuff. It's really simple like that. And then, of course, account would actually have a class originally of hidden. And then when we get to a large screen, we're going to call flex. And now we can see have the sort of mobile size. This is obviously going to be tablet coming into laptop here. When we hit laptop, we get the whole nav bar. So it's quite satisfying to see that, I think, and see that change. Of course, here we probably could introduce some things to make it a little better, because right now this is probably tablet size and it's missing a little bit of fun. So we'll see what we can do about that. But we are trying to keep this super simple, and it is more of just an introduction into Tailwind rather than building a fully fledged super complicated website. Now I'm just going to change the X here. I'm just going to introduce a font awesome icon, which is FA solid bars, which creates a sort of burger bar looking thing. We can see here, burger menu. Eventually we're going to be clicking on this and creating a drop down. And as we see when we go bigger, we change to this. And now what I was speaking about before was keeping the focus on the center of the screen. So let's reduce the size of this. Let's get the adopt port and the account more central, and try and keep everything in a nice central column. So we're going to go to the header, going to put a max. Let's see how useful the sort of emit is here, and we'll start really coming through for us. And we're going to put 8/12 and see what happens when we get to we need to put that as an Excel. We go in, that's not working, so we can have a look at quick search. So we see some live problem solving here, some live technical issues. So we can see I've actually favorited max width before, and Max width we can use in all those sort of examples. Oh, okay, sorry. The max width I was mixing up with the schnorr width. So actually, we can remove that. And if we put it like this, now it should work. So yeah, we've got that now. So we've got that taken a big chunk out. And of course, at this point, all we need to do is do the equivalent for the margins. So we need to do mx -auto, and this is going to center it for us. Oops, sorry, wrong one. And there we go. That's exactly what I was looking for. So those things are staying nice and center for the user. They're not overlapping each other, but they're keeping that sort of stylistic theme that we see a lot nowadays with websites. You know, everything sort of stays really quite central. So yeah, that's another part done. Let's move on. For the parts of the header, when we go here, we have nothing that's really happening when we hover over them. And of course, when we are creating a website, we want it to sort of be interactive. And as well, for accessibility reasons, it'll be really good if we could have this sort of cursor change to a pointer, maybe the color change, maybe the size change. Let's introduce some of these into our project. So let's start with the list. So if we just go from here, so we can go on both at the same time. So we have different sort of ways to do it in Tailwind, so maybe transition, and we can see there transition all comes up, and then we can do the duration. So this is in milliseconds, or you can see here 75 milliseconds, so we're going to choose 300 for that, save that. But of course right now we're not actually transitioning anything, so we need to go to hover, and we want let's see what cursor does. So cursor pointer. So this is obviously only applying to the first one right now. And we can see we get our cursor pointer there, but nothing else happening on the rest. We know this is definitely working. You hover again. And now let's go for a changing color. So let's go text dash, what's it there, light? Say light. There we go. Text light green. So now we're getting a nice little effect of it changing. And of course, now we can start adding things like changing the size and stuff like this. But notice how this sort of P2 transitional duration 300, hover cursor pointer, hover text. I'm going to put the transition in as well. Sorry, not the transition, the scale change as well. We're also transitioning. You know, it starts to get very long. We're going to say the same thing every single time. So what we can do now, so in here, now we're going to create a class, and we're going to call it header or text dash hover. And this is obviously what's going to happen when we hover over one of our items. So what we had before, if we split the screen, it's getting very tight now. I'm just going to put this. What we're looking for is when we're hovering over, we want the text. So that's color and typical HTML to be the light green area. And it doesn't translate over here, so I'm just going to get the value from here. So that's the color sorted. What else we want is the cursors go to pointer, so we can go cursor pointer. That's that sorted. And we also want the size to change, so we're going to do transform scale 0.95. And now we've created a custom style class in our CSS whilst also using Tailwind. So let's go back to here. And now, of course, they're not, the other ones aren't being highlighted. So we can delete all of this, all this hover, and instead of hover, we can go back to styles.css, You can see this is what we call the class. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to put it into our, and now we can see that they all work, apart from the transition. And we can do the same thing with the transition as well. I'm not going to do it here just to save time, but transition all obviously needs to be applied to each of these. Now they're all fully functioning. On this header, we're just going to make a few changes. So like I said before with the transitions, when we're hovering, sorry, now we've got transition all, duration 300 on 4 things that is exactly the same. And also I wanted to apply this to the account and to the adopt pour as well. So we're writing the same thing over and over again, and we want the exact same result. So now we can sort of extract that transition all, duration 300, and we're also going to add the sort of ease in out. So we're going to create a new class. So we're going to go dot. So we want the transition all. So let's call it tran all. We also want the 3 seconds. So -3s, and we're going to go EIO. Not for that the song, whatever it is, but for ease in out. So of course now we're going to go transition all. I think actually 3s first. 3s ease in out. We're going to save that, and now instead of putting the 2 tags here for each one, we can just replace it with 1. And in a way, we're sort of, doing what Tailwind does. We leaves it in. They should work exactly the same as they did before. So let's check that. Okay, maybe I had it a bit shorter than that because that's taking forever to work. So let's go back, change it, and of course now because it is, let's change to 1 second. Oh yeah, of course milliseconds is actually that was less than a second each time. Let's put it as 0.75 seconds. That's basically what it was before. Get all that sorted. So now let's do it to the adopt pour and the count. So we need to do this tran all 3s EIO and the header text as well. So this is all they need. Let's copy those. We need to add that to adopt pour here, with of course the class, or else it will not work. Save that. Adopt pour now does it, and now we need to do the exact same thing for accounts. And notice as well, I put it there because normally I put the LG at the end, the sort of responsive side of things, at the end of my classes. And then if, for example, I was going to put a hover in here, I would put that after that as well. That's just my personal preference. But you might have yours slightly different. And now we can see they're all shrinking. So I think we're actually going to leave the header here now. I think it looks pretty decent for how many minutes work. When we can go from responsive, that's 212, that's way too small. So we've got iPhone 5 there, we go to responsive, and we can go through, and we can see when we get to the Excel breakpoint, we introduce the sort of proper nav bar. At no point does it look bad, or overcramped or cluttered or anything like that. When we get to so that was a large breakpoint, sorry. When we get to the Excel breakpoint, we can really introduce those margins, and we can afford those margins for the bigger screens to keep our users' focus more central. Now we have the styling sorted for the header. So let's sort out the JavaScript and get this drop-down menu working. And just before we do that, I just wanted to change this 3s because it's actually incorrect now. Of course, we're using 0.75. We can't actually use a dot in the styles, so we're going to change it to 750 ms. So it'll actually work in our styles. In styles, we're just going to do the same thing. So 3s change to 750 ms, and now it is factually correct. Let's get to the JavaScript. Of course, first we're going to actually have to import our script. We're going to defer that script as well to make sure it runs at the end. Probably not too essential here, but if you're going to do it quickly, I suppose. We're going to have our source. Our source, of course, is going to be the main.js. So now we're working with that script. Now we're going to actually have to use it on something, aren't we? So we're going to have below our div, because it's still in the header, we're going to call the section. This section is going to be basically exactly the same as our URL before, so there's no real need to type it out again. Of course, we can start getting rid of these that are there. Now we've got rid of that, we don't know what the padding is going to look like, or the styling inside this section. So we need to make sure that's sorted. To begin with as well, of course, we're going to have to hide this. Because if it's showing at the start, then it's going to look terrible like it does now. So yeah, let's hide that. So we're going to have to add some JavaScript in to activate this sort of drop-down menu when we click it, and then obviously retract the drop-down menu when we click it again. So we've got that sorted now. Maybe actually, for the time being, I think as soon as it sounds, I'm going to get rid of that. And we're going to work on this menu just here, so whilst we can actually see it. So of course this flex row is going to actually be a col, and that's already looking 10 times better. We're probably going to have to let's center this, so justify center, and actually align the items as well, which is item center. That's nice and clean in there. I think I might add a border on the top and bottom as well. I'm not actually border top. Border top 2. Let's see what happens. I actually don't know. yeah, okay, it works. I'll actually just put a margin at the top on this. Sorry, on this section. Empty dash 4. There we go. Okay, and border top. And then we'll just put a PT dash 2. I think that's what it was like before. There we go. I'm happy with that now. And now when we go to hidden on this, yeah, it's even. Okay, cool. Let's start adding some JavaScript. So to begin, we're going to have to target this section with an ID, and we're going to use drop-down menu for this. And then, of course, on the actual button as well. So where it's a span in this case. Then we're going to call this give this the ID of the drop-down button. Makes sense. I just have imported the script as well from main.js, and here we are with the blank script. So let's get these values. Let's get these IDs. So we have drop-down button here. So we're going to go document. Document get element by ID, and of course it's called drop-down button. And yeah, go on and const, and then drop-down menu equals document get element by ID menu. So we've got those values now, so now we need to put an if statement in. Actually, an event listener, sorry. So when we're pressing the button of DD button, so we need to do that. DD button, add event listener. Of course, it's going to be a click. You put whatever you want, but it's going to make a lot more sense to do with a click than anything else. Maybe double click if you really wanted to, but it makes sense in my opinion. Yeah, we put the sort of anonymous function within the event listener straight away rather than creating another separate function calling it. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the DB menu. When we click on that, we want to toggle hidden. So when we click it, of course, it shows, and it might work without it. Yeah, it does. So yeah, there we go. We have our sort of drop-down menu working perfect there every time I click. And that's it for the header. That's everything done. So let's move on to the next section.